First of all, I would like to thank ArchiNet for this initiative, for letting us sit together and talk about subjects relating to architecture and urban planning. Today, my topic is about the need for sustainable residential neighborhoods. Streets, their sidewalks, are the main public places of a city. They are the most vital organs. This is a quote from Jane Jacobs. She's an urbanist, and she has written a lot about streets, sidewalks, and the urban walkability and vitality. Just to give you a brief about myself, I'm Lama Zagha. I hold a PhD in architecture with emphasis in housing. I have above 30 years of experience. Currently, I'm a senior infrastructure advisor at UNOPS. I worked as a consultant for Omran Infrastructure and Environment, Irbid Development Corporation, Khayrat Belady Company. I was a principal for the Urban Planning and Urban Design Unit at Arabtech Jardaneh and taught as an assistant professor at Albayt University and lecturer at the Applied Science University. Currently, I'm a board member at the Jordanian Planning Forum and was a member at the central body of Jordan engineers. I'm going to start my presentation with talking about urbanization, then sustainable neighborhoods. Afterwards, I'll move to urbanized Amman and the sustainable neighborhoods principles. Urbanization. Word urbanization, in 2020, the world population was around 7.8 billion, and this number will increase and reach 10 billion in 2050. The ratio of the ratio of urban population is expected to increase from 55% in 2018 till 68% in 2050. So there is an enormous increase in the urban living within cities. Urban areas that are situated alongside the coastlines in cities have high risk of climate change impact, including urban heat islands, rise of sea level, droughts, floods, and temperature increases. By 2100, an estimation of 85% of the population of the world population will live in cities, as we have seen in this slide. Cities are the space for human population, for economic activities, and for man-made environment to exist and to flourish. Cities consume over 66% of the world's energy. They account for 70% of the global CO2 emissions, and they comprise less than 3% of the Earth's surface. So we see how much cities are harming the environment with regard to CO2 emissions. Cities generate 80% of the global GDP. To ensure sustainability, cities should be a source of economic development. It should serve the social well-being as well as the environmental conditions where people are living and working and playing. This image shows us the spatial structure of two cities. One is Atlanta in the US and Barcelona in Europe. We can see that both of them have similar population, which is around 5 billion people. But what's the difference is that Barcelona is 26 times smaller than Atlanta, and it has higher urban density. Barcelona is 11 times lower in CO2 emissions from urban transport than Atlanta. So compact development can't reduce the transport emission. And this is really an illustration of this. So here in this slide, we see the most populated cities in the world with population of 17, with populations with density of 17,000 people per kilometer square, reaching to 55,000 kilometers per square. And this is the Dhaka, Bangladesh is the most dense area in the world, which has around 55,000 people per kilometer square. And there is variety. We'll see some, like Paris, it's less, it's about 7,400 people per kilometer square. Urbanization has opportunities and it has its challenges. Urbanization enhances the local economy, it provides services for people, and also it provides better housing options. But the challenges are much severe. It puts pressure on the provision of services. It creates urban sprawl, increases poverty, unemployment, and housing shortages, as well as environmental disturbances that we are seeing recently or within the 5 years ago, such as climate change, floods. In this slide, we see the percentages of urban agglomeration by size. The shaded areas in brown show us the countries that have 80 to 100% of urban people residing in it. North America and South America, Morocco, Libya, Madrid, France, and Sweden are the countries that have above 80% of people living in urban areas, as well as the Middle East. In this slide, we see the urbanization levels in the MENA region. They are uneven and vary from very low to high. We see Kuwait, Qatar, and as well as the United Emirates. They have high urbanized population living within them. But on the other hand, we see Egypt, it has less than 43% of people living in it. Jordan, around 91.1% of people living in urban areas. The world percentage is around 65%, whereas the MENA percentage is around 55%. So let's talk here about streets and open spaces. Street and open spaces, as Jane mentions, they are the vital organs of the city or even of the neighborhood level. When we think about streets, we need to think also about the open spaces. So streets, as a percentages, we see variation within countries of how much they have designated for streets and open spaces, with low globally as 16% to a high like Australia and New Zealand of 78%. Europe and North America around 57%, and Eastern and Southern Asia 26.8%. These are the spaces allocated for streets and for open spaces. The share of land allocated for streets varied for developing countries and for the developed countries. In the developed world, such as Europe and North America, we see this share, the street share is around 25% and the suburban around 15%, whereas in the developing world, it's in the urban area it's less than 15% and in the suburb it's less than 10%. This is a comparison between the sprawl and the compact urban form. We see here Houston, Texas. It's an example of suburban development, and it's an example of a sprawl. People need to move and to commute a long distance from their workplace, reaching to their housing. And this is really puts pressure on the infrastructure, and it basically does harm effects to the environment because we're building more asphalt, and it also increases the heat island effects. On the right side, we see the compact urban form of Warwick in England, and we see how when we live nearby with diversity, with different services, we live in area that we can live, work, play, and study. The Interstate 405 in Los Angeles is an example of what's been done also in the United States. In around 2016, the United States put around $1.1 billion to widen the Los Angeles Interstate. This interstate, basically, it's a freeway that goes from Irvine in the south to Los Angeles, ending in San Fernando. And the extra lanes that has been added to reduce the time, afterwards they found out that rather than it's just reduced to 1 minute. So the commuting time in the morning for people going from the south to the north, just they have just 1 minute saving in time. So when we design for streets, that doesn't mean that basically we are reducing the effects. So if you design for streets, you'll be having more traffic rather than less traffic. Suburbs. The American dream is about living in the suburbs, having 2 cars, having a nice large house. And this is what every American aspires. But what you see is really a tragic. You see people commuting on the highways from where they work to reach to where they live. And it's a car dependent environment. It's inefficient, unsustainable, and disconnected. Right now, America is seeing that this is a dilemma of what they have planned, and this is transferred to the developed world as well, as we'll see later on. We're going to talk now about sustainable neighborhoods. Sustainable neighborhoods goal number 11 of the United Nations Sustainable Development was introduced along with other goals in 2016, with the aim to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. This goal 11, shouldn't be studied alone. It should take into consideration goal number 3, good health and well-being, number 10, reduce inequalities, 13, climate action, and 17, partnership for goals. Goal number 11 addresses very important issues about transportation for all, whether you are a woman, whether you have disabilities, whether you have children, small children. So the transport should be thought of, and the public transport should be thought of to be inclusive for all. Another issue is about having green areas, public space, accessible for all people, even those with disabilities. What's sustainability? Sustainability is defined by the World Commission of Environment and Development. It's about meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the needs of the future generation to meet their own needs. It refers to a well-balanced socio-economic, spatial aspects. So we shouldn't look only on the economic aspect as been done in the developing countries of housing everything in the capital. We should always think about economic, social, spatial, and environmental issues in a balanced way. And there are so many dimensions in these, and these should be studied cumulatively. Another quote by James Jacob addressing walkability, and this is around we're talking about 1961. It talks about short blocks, population density, diversity, building styles, as well as people playing on sidewalks, walks, or even on streets. The evolution of neighborhood in the Western, it started in 1929 by Clarence Perry. Clarence Perry, he's an urban designer, and he addressed the neighborhood unit formula. The neighborhood unit formula is about having the school in the inner of the neighborhood. This school is an elementary school. It houses around 5,000 to 10,000 people. And the major roads basically surrounds the neighborhood. It doesn't go, the major street doesn't go inside the neighborhood. It has convenient transportation. The services are allocated at the periphery of the neighborhood. And people can reach the convenient transportation, and it's about 5-minute walk, 400-meter radius. Another movement in the States is in 1980, which is called the New Urbanism. The New Urbanism, it addresses the ills associated with urban sprawl that we've seen. It's an urban design movement. It addresses walkability. It addresses a 5-minute walking distances, and neighborhood containing a range of services, housing types, and jobs. So what is complete neighborhoods? Complete neighborhoods is a neighborhood that has everything that a resident needs, whether for recreation, whether for jobs, whether for services. So it's a complete neighborhood with all the needs that any person needs. It has a center, it's close to transportation, it's walkable, it has a proper density with mixed uses and mixed incomes. I don't know if any one of you heard about Curitiba in Brazil. It is one of the first cities to market itself as green in 1980. So this is not new. And it's really owned, this is owned to the mayor. The mayor is an architect, and his name is James Lerner. He wanted the people of Curitiba to live happily and healthy. And it's by having more green spaces within Curitiba, as well as providing good public transport. So when you go to this area, you find spaces for biking, for buses, as well as for vehicles. 70% of the people rely on public transport. There is over 50 meters square of green space per capita, which is very, very a huge amount. And so many bike lanes, around 145 kilometers square of bikes. There are forests. You feel that you are living in a forest, parks, and green space. Paris, on the other hand, the recently elected mayor by the name Anne Hidalgo in 2020, around April 2020, she announced that she wants to have Paris as a 15-minute city where all essential services can be reached, whether housing or working or healthcare or education or leisure within 15 minutes, walk or bike from wherever you want to go. So this is about reinventing the idea of proximity or nearness. So you don't need to rely on public transport. You don't need to endure stress while commuting, and you don't need this longer commutes to reach any type of destination. So what she's gonna do is most of the spaces allocated for vehicles will be transferred to bicycles and bicycle lanes. Portland, it's in Oregon, it's in the United States. It's the first city to provide comprehensive plan to reduce the CO2 emissions. It addresses the 20-minute neighborhood. Whether we're talking about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, this is just dimensions, but we need to think about compactness. So it focuses about increasing the number of citizens living in complete neighborhoods where they are able to walk and cycle to reach their needs, their daily needs. And here, the image on the right to the left, you see the yellowish color. These are complete neighborhoods. Citizens living in these areas can access all basic needs within walking distances. The sustainable neighborhoods of Portland. It includes improvement, whether for bicycles and also for the rail transit, which also they use right light rail to allow people to move within the city. Also, you can see that there is an urban growth boundary. There is a green space around Portland neighborhoods that categorized it as an area and separates it from other cities. It has a healthy center, and they added additional housing and retail within walking distances. This is also about the political leadership. Citizens alone cannot change. The political will is an important issue to address while moving to sustainability. Melbourne, Australia, is another example about what they're doing. They had a plan from 2017 and 2050, and also they aim about having 20-minute neighborhood where everyone locally can have access to basic services within walking distances, as well as reaching public transport. They want to make Melbourne healthier and inclusive. They put into research, they researched this area basically, and they thought about connected path, about the public realm, about services and destinations, about the quality. It's not just providing public transport. You have to provide good quality of public transport, proper densities to thrive or enhance the local economies. So they put on strategies, policies, and principles in order to move in these issues, and they are tracking their progress. They have their strategies including movement, housing diversity, streets, also destinations, streetscape improvements, public space, community infrastructure, and the sense of place and healthy food. They have community garden within their areas where you can harvest organic crops in these neighborhoods. So different features within the 20-minute neighborhood of Portland, of Melbourne, focusing on walkability, community gardens, local schools, housing diversities, good streets and spaces, and so forth. The catchment that they thought of is about a radius of 18 meter walkable with mixed uses, as we've seen in this slide. So sustainable neighborhood, it has socio-economic benefits as well as health benefits. We can combine health benefit with the social benefits, but in here, we're gonna see that it's separate. Economic benefits, you're gonna increase transportation capacity because people will depend on public transport to move around. If you have a good public transport, people will use it. It will reduce also the cost of the expenditure on transport, of using your own vehicle to move around from one space to another. Lower health costs, because within the sustainable city, you'll be moving, you'll be walking around, you'll be having less health problems, and then this will be a lower cost on the government to cure you. So increasing also the trading because due to density and having people living in the area and enjoying different services within the area. So there will be viability to build, and this will increase the economy. And if this is done for the suburb, it will also increase the viability of the suburb. Health benefits. It will in fact reduce obesity. Obesity is due to inactivity. People, because we lack good spaces to move around, most of the people, even Jordanian peoples and all everywhere in the world, there are research that obesity is correlated with inactivity. So if you don't move around, you will be obese. This is there is research on it, and chronic diseases. So there is a health benefit of having sustainable neighborhood. It will increase your walking rate. It promotes mental health. It reduces stress. We're so many stress. We're stressed. I don't think that any one of you, if we do basically a questionnaire, most of us are stressed. So if we move around, walk, enjoy, rather than moving within our vehicles, we can move using our legs and walk and enjoy nature if we build our cities right. And we will sleep better. So it will improve our well-being. Social benefits. We will interact with our neighbors. If I ask any one of you, maybe some of you will not know their neighbors because just we're living in blocks. But if we have this kind of space, we will have the social connections again. We will be more linked to each other as humans. We'll support social equity. There will be also sense of community. We love the area that we're living in, and also safety through surveillance, because so many people will be on the street, safety will be there. Environmental issues. We will benefit with regard to reducing the carbon footprints if we're moving to compact development. Mixed use and high density also reduces pollution and fuel consumption, because we're not relying on, we will not depend on our cars to move around like now. And walking to school reduces CO2. So you will leave your kids to walk to school rather than dropping them off. So you'll have more sustainable neighborhoods. I don't know if any one of you heard about C40 cities. C40 cities is a network of world's mega cities committed to addressing climate change. It supports cities to cooperate, share knowledge, sustainable actions to climate change. It's the plan for sustainable recovery after the pandemic. One of the 3 points of the key actions that I want to mention here regarding their meeting that took place on the 25th of July 2020. So the key action they addressed is 15-minute cities where people, residents can walk and cycle to reach their destinations, from home to office or from home to shops or so forth. Streets they want to give, and this is what we're talking about. We need to give the streets. We need to give the streets back to people rather than we're designing now streets for the cars. And this is not right. We want the streets to be back to people, to walk and to cycle and to enjoy green infrastructure. We need to build with nature. We need to integrate nature within our design. We cannot live just with asphalts. It's also bad for our health and for our cognitions. We need to improve our livability, our physical and mental health. And we need to reduce the risk of extreme heat that we are facing nowadays due to heat island effects, because we're building streets, and this is what we're doing. We're not thinking about urban design elements. I'm going to talk about urbanized Amman. Amman's population in 2021 is over 10 million. The urban population, as I mentioned earlier, is around 91%. The capital Amman has over 4.5 million of people living in it, and it increased from 1.7 in 2004, and now we're seeing how congested is Amman. This is due to natural growth, internal migration, as well as migration from neighboring countries. 40% of Amman population is under the age of 20. The city is no longer functioning in terms of housing, access to public transport, as well as public space. People who are living in Amman are seeing this daily about the suffering of the residents of Amman. An urban master plan was developed between 2007 and 2009 to regulate urban sprawl. It merged several districts and increase the area of Amman from 680 square meter to 1,680 square meter. Afterwards, between 2019 and 2016, the city reconsidered the merging of the new districts and decreased the area to 800 square meter. 48%, so around half of the lands of GAM are zoned and regulated, and the rest of them aren't zoned or regulated. 293 kilometers of Amman is built up, and the rest, which count to 37%, this is account 37%, and the rest, which is 63%, isn't built up. So we see how many, the areas that is built up is around 1/3. Amman density. Amman is around, we have around 13,600 people per kilometer square. This is taking the 293 kilometers of built up area. But if the density goes down to around 5,000, if we consider the 800 kilometers square. The density is uneven, and this image on the right shows the disparity between the east and west of Amman. East is so much overcrowded, and it's reaching over 20,000 inhabitants per kilometer square. In this image, we show the variance of population densities. We see here in the east of Amman, the 20,000 people per kilometer square, whereas in other areas, just as west or even south of Amman, we see a minimal densities of 1 person per reaching to 1 person per kilometer square. So this is the various density because we don't consider density when planning. So we have many challenges. It's increasing population. Increasing population is not a problem, but the problem is planning. If we don't plan right, we'll have the circumstances of what we'll be seeing, and now the climate change is one of the effects that we should tackle. Inefficient public transportation, narrow and unmaintained pedestrian path. People can hardly walk on the pavements. If you move around in Amman, you see people walking on the streets rather than the pavements, because pavement either designed for the streets or pavements are not maintained. So it's hardly to walk on them. There is lack of open spaces, noise, pollution, congestion, lack of affordable housing. We have a problem that we don't see a clear vision, no strategies and comprehensive plans. There is socio-economic inequity, urban sprawls, and outdated building laws, as well as climate change. The climate change effects, we've witnessed in 2015, the flash floods in Amman, that the heavy rains caused severe flash floods, which led to loss of life, damaged properties, floods on the streets, and people trapped in their cars and homes. Sprawl. Hardly, I want to talk about this because this is an important issue. It's hardly to find affordable plots in the inner city of Amman. So associations tend to offer plots to their members in the suburbs on agricultural lands where no services are found. So here is an example of one of the projects in Tunaib that is basically done by the Jordan Engineers Associations. This is service plots. You just buy a plot and build there. But how you're gonna reach your work? How you're gonna buy food? How you're gonna send your kids to schools? And this is where people need to spend, if they build there, they need to spend 33 minutes going and coming back and forth to work or to send their schools. And this is what's happening here is that there is no consideration about having people close to the city and resolving the inner problems within the city. Another example is the Andalusia project. This project is in Al, and it's a gated community. And is that right that we just have people living in a gated area? Here you cannot enter. I went there, I couldn't enter. Where are you coming? Why are you coming here? To who you want to visit? So you can't enter. Just people who are living there can enter the space. But is this what we're looking for? This type of neighborhoods are designed for upper middle class or high income class, but they are living here also far away from the city, where you need around half an hour to go and come back one way. I'm saying from Amman, reaching Al, it will take you half an hour. And the services there, you won't have services within walking distance. Okay, you live in a good environment, but you're segregated. Is this what we're looking for? No, this is not right. Global integration. I wanted to show just an example here that was done, which is we mapped the city of Amman using space syntax to assess global and local integration. Around 15,000 axial lines were drawn. And this is around 15 kilometers away from the city center. The red colors that you see here is that it shows the lines that of the roads that are integrated and can be reached by car. This is at a global level. And where we see, and the yellowish, or even if you go to bluish, the bluish are the segregated lines you can hardly, and even by car to reach, and it will take you more time to reach there. The reddish car is mostly, basically, it's toward the city center, where streets near Al-Malik Kanur Street and Al-Malik Rania streets exist, and basically where you have more land use and density and land values that exist on that. So mostly in this image, you can see that the segregation around the inner city, especially the periphery, where we lack even, we can hardly travel within our cars to reach these areas, and it will take us more time to reach these areas. At a local level, we see most of our neighborhoods, and this at the local level, it addresses how much you can walk within the neighborhoods at 3 to 4 spaces or 3 to 4 streets. And this is show us many of the bluish color, and the bluish colors means you're segregated. You can hardly walk within the area that you're living in. So this means that the accessibility at the neighborhood level is problematic. Sustainable neighborhood principles. I'm going to here discuss about the principle of sustainable neighborhoods. We need to talk about walkable radius. 5 minutes walk around 400 meters is acceptable for different people. But people, maybe for children, they need to walk around 300 meters. But we need to think about walkability and people reaching their destination while walking, to reach their mixed use, open spaces, public transport, mosque, and elementary school. This is encourage us to move around when we have a walkable neighborhood. So walkable streets, they are a measure to reduce congestion and reliance on the cars, as we are seeing today. So when we say 20 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it depends also the distances that we move depends about our walking speed, whether it's, so if we take the walking speed is about 4 or 5 kilometers per hour, we can see the parameters of 400, 800, or 1,200 if we take the 15 minutes walk. But just this is the importance about this is just to consider If we have a neighborhood of 5 minutes, the services that we offer it will be different than when we walk for 10 or 15 minutes. At the 10 or 15 minutes, we can provide further services just as police station, secondary school, larger parks, and health center. This slide shows the importance of not just a walkable radius, but also of connected radius, no lack of connectivity, as well as children's ability to walk, and we need to consider it for only 300 meters, as well as in the rural area, people tend to walk more than in urban areas, and they might walk the 800-meter radius. Also, if there is no crossing, and we need to consider it as an edge for the 400 meters. So this quote is by Jeff Speck, and it's really very interesting. So what he addresses is that if you live in a less walkable neighborhood, you are 60% more likely to be overweight. So if we're living in non-walkable areas, we will be obese if we don't move around, or overweight. So adequate space for streets and open. And we mentioned that we have to have space. And when we say space for streets and open spaces, this means that space should be around with the streets and open spaces. It should account for around 50%, 30% street, and 15 to 20% open spaces. This is the least amount. And if we offer more space for open spaces, that would be great. Mobility. Streets should provide mobility for pedestrian. When we design our street, we should consider pedestrian. We should consider bikes, universal accessibility. People with disabilities, we need to consider their needs when walking around. Why? Because they're disabled, they cannot walk. No, we have to provide them the right environment for them to walk. And accessibility for public transport and private vehicles. Some streets should be limited to public transport, whereas others should be limited to cyclists and pedestrians. And also, when we think about cycling, we should think about cycling to reach public transport where people can basically stock their bikes and take the public transport. I wanted to show, this is in a project that we've done for Irbid Development Company. This is the master plan. And this is what I want to address, that we need to specify the space needed for pedestrians, needed for the tree, needed for parking, and needed for the vehicles, as well as for open spaces. So we need to study in sections and in details, and to designate where everyone will move around. It's not about only offering public open spaces. We should offer good quality of public open spaces. It will contribute to good sense of citizenship. It will encourage you to walk, and it will reduce the impact on climate change. So public spaces, they should be secure, green, social mix, multifunctional, accessible, inclusive, and with amenities. Here we see lighting fixtures should be added. We see the biking racks, as well as greenery and seating areas. Connectivity. Connectivity will allow one to move. So it's not just designing streets. We need to design connected street and not disintegrated street or disconnected street. This will reduce congestion will improve mobility, and it will enable people to reach and have choices to reach the goods and services. Mixed use. We should design mixed use neighborhoods. We need to combine economic, housing, administrative in one area. This will reduce the need to travel. It will provide closer public space, creates local jobs, and promotes local economy. We should also think always about integrating mixed land use with transportation planning. Adequate density and compact form. In this image on the right, we see if we design just plots and blocks and with one housing unit on it, and then if we can have more than one housing combined together and providing an ecological space for the people to enjoy and to play in it. So adequate density, it ensures the economy of scale. It ensures livability, walkability, street life, and helps to deal with the urban sprawl. I mean, what we talked about. We talked about because we don't design with proper density. So if we take density into consideration, we will eliminate urban sprawl, and we will see more people, residing next to each other. So it will resolve urban sprawl. Mixed social structure. We should stop. I mean, like here in Jordan, we're having East and West Amman, and each have its urban morphology. We need to integrate people. We need to integrate social structure together. Because if you have a neighborhood, you need there will be different jobs. So in order to minimize people commuting time, you need people schools, you need teachers, you need, let's say, even a mailman, and so forth. You need lower class jobs. And this is what we're talking about, that we need to offer housing for those people in need. And it's basically at least to allocate 20% for affordable housing within our neighborhoods. We need to think about social equity that we always neglect. And people without money, unfortunately, now reside in overcrowding situation. We need to think about having people living together to enjoy interaction, to enjoy diversity, and allocating different types of lots, not just homes. We can allocate different types of lot sizes, housing types, and mixed tenure, whether rent or whether ownership, as well as having different regulations to accommodate such a diversity. Integrated neighborhoods. Neighborhoods shouldn't be segregated. They should be integrated together and integrated at the neighborhoods level. As we see here, they should be integrated as well as to the district level. There should be integration also of reliable transport within neighborhoods and districts. The transport should be reliable, it should be punctual, it should be attractive for people to use it. Now we don't use it, and basically I myself, I don't use it because it's not attractive to me, it's not punctual, there's no quality of buses, and it's not reliable. So if you offer good service, people will use it, and I will use it as well. So we need to consider the capacity also of the buses. And when we think about public transport, we need to think about development opportunities close to the public transport routes. Mobility shift. We need to encourage shifting from energy-intensive mobility, such as the car that we're using today, to walking, cycling, and public transport. So think about your life now without the car and how you will enjoy living much better. I will assure you, we will live, all of us, happier if we don't have the car, but if we have the proper ecology. So it will make us move and cycle safe and having attractive scenery to enjoy. So the scene that we should see is not the domination of the car, but we need to see the domination of the pedestrianized street. Green transport. We need to promote transport by shifting from the fossil fuel to vehicles either with either hybrid or electric cars. And this is the government should invest in this and consider this within their policies. This is will reduce the CO2 emissions as well. This is a quote from Christopher Lindberger. He says that the best economic performance in the modern society is the found in walkable urban precincts. So it's the economy. It's hand in hand. You have better economy if you have walkable neighborhoods. These principles can be applied for growing cities, for new neighborhoods and urban extensions, for densifications, and for urban renewals. Conclusions. I'm going to talk about how we began. We began with John Jacobs talking about the importance of walkability and of having streets and open spaces, the vital organs of the city. And I'm going to end also with the conclusions of with these about walkable streets. Walkable streets are very important, combined with mixed use, high density, social mix, open spaces, good public transport will provide the sustainability features that we've talked about, socio-economic, environmental, spatial, and health benefits. So higher density development doesn't mean that you don't have a quality of public spaces. So higher density development need to be matched with good quality of public spaces and greenery. We need to consider connected, integrated, accessible streets and eco-friendly or maintained and well-maintained pavements to promote walking and lanes for cycling to reach locations. Land use planning should be aligned with transportation planning because this is where the density will occur and where you'll have people having their time within these areas. Government policies need to focus on compact form. And there should be a shift towards walking, cycling, and low emission mode of transport. Land efficiency should be maximized and sprawl should be discouraged. So we need to use our lands properly and not to allow urban sprawl to expand. Mass transit should be integrated within the neighborhood. It should be of good quality. It should be attractive and reliable for people to use it with frequency and punctuality. Cities should consider both bottom-up and upper-down approaches to resolve the current problem of sprawl and tackle urbanization. So change is the current practice. So we need to change in the current practices in designing cities and neighborhood. This is crucial to local and global sustainability. I'm going to end in two quotes One of the quotes that I really admire, Obama in 2012, and it's not about just the American people. It exists everywhere. That we can either settle for a country where a shrinking number of people do really well. And this is all over the world. It's not just in America. We have just small fraction, even in our country, that people really do well and have the power, while the growing number, even Americans or Jordanian or so forth, are barely get there. So we need to restore economy, even in Jordan, where everyone gets their fair share. So one important issue that I really liked about this quote is that everyone does their fair share and everyone play by the same set of rules. And this is, I want to consider that if we need to move into sustainable development strategies, policies, principle, everyone should play with the same rules. Not because if someone has the power or has a class or a politician can break the rules. Everyone should follow the rules. And another quote that I really admire by Winston Churchill is that to improve is to change. So we need to change. We shouldn't continue planning as we are planning. To be perfect is to change often. So we need to think about change, even if sometimes we change our attitudes to be better people. But this is at the side of thinking locally and globally, and thinking of the change for the interest of the universe, not the interest of ourselves or our deeds that we are considering. So we need to change and think about moving forward where everyone have their share of success and thinking about good for all rather than for oneself. And by this, I end my talk and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lama. We already had received some questions. The first question is from Dr. Abir. You mentioned Jane Jacobs' theory that emerged in 1961. Her theory has been applied in 70s and 80s. However, apparently it didn't succeed. We're still calling to re-implement her theory. What's the difference today? In today's call to revive her theory than what was implemented in 70s?
All right. Thank you very much. Jane Jacobs, she's an American-Canadian journalist and urbanist. And she's not a planner by say, but what I really like about her is her vocabulary, her strong vocabulary that's applicable till today. She's talking about diversity, short blocks, surveillance, diversity. These themes, she's not a planner by the way, but these sentences that I mentioned, streets and open spaces that she addresses, she's a woman, but she's thinking of what she's looking about what's happening in the world that we're living in. And she's addressing issues for the urban designers to think of. So I don't think that her talks or her writings in 1961 is still not useful for today. I wish that we followed some of her theories today, because some of her quotes are still viable today, and most of them are viable today. And unfortunately, we're moving into designing roads and disregarding people who are the elements of any environment that we live on. So I still believe that Jane Jacobs' ideas regarding urban space can be applicable by urban designers. And just to mention that we can take these words and analyze them. They are workable. Okay, thank you.
We have a second question from Rina. She says, how do you perceive reaching sustainable urban development in Amman? Comparing to...
Okay. Can you repeat the question? Okay.
Yes. She says this is applicable in Europe especially. How do you perceive reaching sustainable urban development in Amman?
I mean, what I addressed here is sustainable urban development. And this is why I talked in English, because I want, this issue is worldwide. It's not just in the United States or in Amman or anywhere in the world. Sustainable urban development, it's a world topic, and we can address it, whether we address it in the States or in Jordan, it follows similar themes. And these are the principles that I mentioned today, are some of the principles that people can take it, whether you're designing neighborhoods in Jordan or whether you're designing neighborhoods in the States or even in Paris. So this is applicable everywhere.
There's another question from Dr. Abir. With the 15 minutes neighborhood, there is a fear of turning neighborhoods into mosaic-like or gated communities, which will produce more social isolation and fragmentation on the city level. How to overcome this?
We're talking about 15-minute walk doesn't mean overcrowding. We said that so 15 minutes walk is just a dimension that we are thinking of. We're not thinking, and the density, it can be studied, whether 10,000 people can live in that area. With proper consideration, you're not reaching overcrowding. Within 15-minute walk, you can access your daily needs, play, work, and study, as well as having your social needs. So it means what I mentioned is that it's proper density, it's not overcrowding, and I don't believe that 15 minutes will be an overcrowded if we study it with the proper density.
There's a question from Samir. What is the impact of the following inventions on the mentioned urban sustainable theory, like smart grids and grid energy, reusable water, self-sustainable homes, electric and autonomous driving of vehicles, etc.?
Usually you can address sustainability at the urban level and at the building level. So even what he's mentioned about even photovoltaic cells can be applicable. Wind energy, using wind, it can be applicable. So it's just, these are some elements that can be applicable, but I've addressed here the most crucial issues that we need to start thinking of. I mean, what issues I need to add something, that now we're talking about smart cities a lot in the theory or even in webinars. But here I wanted to address the sustainability. I don't believe that we need, especially in the developing countries, that we need now to think about smart cities without starting with the sustainable cities. So you start sustainable cities and then you consider, because if we are lacking the economy of scale, we cannot move into smart without having the base right. We're not having the base right. We need to start with the base and then moving with the smart strategies for in cities, because smart cities basically depends on IT technology and ability to communicate with each other using IT. Other sources can be incorporated, such as renewable energy. This issue can be tackled within the sustainable energy stream, but smart cities, I think, should be done at a later stage after we resolve our current situations of our neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. There's a question from Layan. Any good examples of sustainable neighborhoods in the Arab world, and how can we start reinventing badly planned existing cities?
Badly planned, and unfortunately, I mean, in the literature, I haven't seen now a very good example that I can really talk about. But the other question, what was it?
Any good example of sustainable neighborhoods in the Arab world?
And the other one? And
how can we start reinventing the badly planned existing cities?
Okay, first of all, you have to have the will of the politician, the will of the country to move forward. And then it can be done. and this is it can be done for our existing neighborhoods. This can, I mean, now Paris is doing it, so why we can do it. We need to, sometimes you need to change the streets from motorized streets to basically walkable streets by allocating spaces. So you can change the movement of the cars one way or two way. It can be replanned. Our neighborhood, existing neighborhoods can be planned, and it might end up in even changing in use, because I don't think Amman wasn't done based on a comprehensive master plan. It's done based on the social needs of its citizenship. So we didn't have comprehensive plan for Amman at the start, and this is what you see in Amman. It's a mix of different uses, and sometimes the uses aren't basically put into the right locations. So it can be done, but as I mentioned, there should be a dialogue and a participatory approach between the people living in the neighborhoods and between different stakeholders, including the city members itself.
Mm-hmm. We still have a few questions. In the first part of the talk, you promoted the dimension of density as a main rationale for sustainability. What about city size? Cities may be so large in size, yet with high density, thus are not sustainable. What is the highest density possible to maintain sustainability?
As I mentioned, you need to think not just about the size of the city itself. Whenever the city is expanded, there is a problem. We need to now we need to think about stop the spreading of the city. When the city reaches its maturity, it needs to be stopped in expansion, and we need to start basically having like suburban areas, but with mixed use and adequate density people living in it. We don't need always to have the capital, like here, the capital of Amman having everything, all the economic activities are located in Amman. We need to think about moving some of the economic activities or in other areas. And this is how you vitalize other areas. You generate better economy for the other areas. So we need to start stopping the expansion. It's now Amman is a metropolitan city, and just 10 million people is large enough. So you need to start thinking about moving into the suburb and vitalizing the suburbs.
So the last question now we have from Shireen. In the pandemic of Corona, don't you think compacted housing failed comparing to sprawls? Does this mean that understanding sustainability might be hard to invest parallel with social aspects, especially in the Middle East communities?
I mean, I wish Shireen to tell me how, from where did she conclude this? I mean, compactness, so we had here in Jordan, so many people suffered from reaching local shops to get their daily needs. I mean, if you live in a compact city or compact neighborhood, you won't suffer. You will have ease of access to where you want. But so many people that live in segregated areas in Amman, or even in the inner in Amman, even in, let's say, here near in Rabia or whatever districts, they had problems reaching to the shops. So compact, I doubt it will be a problem. Compact is what we are looking for. There won't be a problem. What we are having here, the problem, even with the pandemic, is that we don't have sustainable or compact neighborhoods that host. When we talk about compactness, we need to host services within them. But if you're talking about compact without services, this is a problem. We need to look at compactness as a wholeness with different mixed use and with different housing as well as open spaces. So compactness alone is not the right to talk about. We should include it with other dimensions.
Okay, Dr. Lama, we have covered all the questions we had, and thank you again for accepting our invitation and this informative talk.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Take care.
Thank you. You too. Okay.